Hi guys, so I fell last week and I crashed into some shopping trolleys. Ow. And as soon as that happened, I knew I'd be nursing a bruise for a couple of weeks. This is because I bruise easily. Sometimes I just wake up with a bruise. Sometimes I kind of slightly bump into something and get bruises. So I thought, why not talk about bruises? And then naturally, I thought, why not talk about poop? So let's talk about you and your bruises and your poop. So the fancy medical terms for bruises are ecchymosis, contusion, hematoma. All this means is that you have blood in your tissues. Somehow, some way, your blood vessels have become broken and your blood has gone into your tissues, but you've not cut your skin, so it's not coming out, so it's trapped within your tissue. So that's all that is. It's just blood in a tissue, and your body has to figure out how to remove it from there because it's not supposed to be there. Before I go on, let's look at the anatomy of a red blood cell. Well, it's very, very simple. A red blood cell doesn't contain much. This is because your red blood cell has one job and one job only. It's to get all that oxygen from your lungs and take it to wherever it's needed in your body. So this means your red blood cell doesn't contain anything inside it like a nucleus or all these other fancy things we find in all these other cells. It contains one thing only, hemoglobin. So hemoglobin is a bunch of proteins that come together, and in the middle of them it contains iron. So iron is where your oxygen binds it. So you have 4 hemoglobins in one blood cell, and that means you can carry 4 molecules of oxygen on one red blood cell. And that's it. That's the anatomy of a red blood cell. There's not much to it. But once you kind of understand what a red blood cell contains, then you'll kind of understand why your bruises look the way they do and why your poop is brown. If you've ever had a bruise, you know it kind of changes shape and color over time. So it starts off as red or a bit darker depending on the skin tone that you have. So when it's red, that's all that fresh blood that's full of oxygen that's just come out of, so it's a lot lighter. And as the oxygen starts to leave your red blood cell, it starts to get darker. It starts to look a bit more blue, a bit more purpley. It gets a lot darker. When iron is bound to oxygen, it changes the shape of hemoglobin and kind of changes the color. It becomes a bit brighter and it becomes a bit redder. But when oxygen is not in there, it changes the shape and it changes the color a bit as well. So it becomes a bit duller and a bit darker. This is why if you can see your veins, they usually look a bit bluey greeny because your veins have less oxygen than your arteries. So this is what happens to your bruise. As more oxygen is leaving, it's changing the color of the hemoglobin. And then your immune system comes in and starts breaking down the hemoglobin. And what this does, it releases that iron. This iron is going to be taken up by something called hemosiderin, and this is going to take it and store it, and you're going to reuse this iron another time, put it back into some more red blood cells. And the rest of the hemoglobin is broken down into something called bilirubin, and your bruise is starting to fade. It starts to get a bit yellow. Sometimes it gets a little ring around it, and it continues to fade and it starts to go a bit brown, and eventually it just fades away. So this process usually takes around 10 to 14 days. What's this got to do with poop, I hear you ask? Well, this process of breaking down your red blood cells and saving the iron and breaking it down to bilirubin is exactly what happens in your spleen and your liver. So your red blood cells are produced by your bone marrow. They're released into your bloodstream and they do their job for 100 to 120 days. When it gets to 120 days, they start to get a bit tired. So your immune system basically tags them for death. This means as they're going through the spleen, which is a big red organ on your left side, or your liver, they're like, oh, this one's being tagged for death, so we need to break it down. Like an old car which just is not running the way it used to, it needs to be stripped down, and the bits which can be used again, which is your iron, they get taken away and they're stored up and used again, and the other bits they're not really needed, so they're kind of used for other things. So it's the exact same process. It breaks it down, and in the end you have this bilirubin. So what your body does with this bilirubin, it takes it to the liver. So your liver is the one that processes this bilirubin, and then it puts it into your bile. So the bile is this darkish, fatty liquid that's stored in your gallbladder. So every time you eat, your gallbladder squeezes out this bile, and it actually helps us absorb some of the food because it contains some fats in them, some cholesterol. And as this mixture of bile and the food that you've just eaten passes through your intestines, it gets to your large intestine. And by the time it's reached your large intestine, there's not many nutrients your body needs from it, but your bacteria loves it. It goes to town on all this bile and all this waste and all this fiber and things from your food. And by the time it's finished with all this bilirubin, it's turned it into something called statorubin, stercorubin, stercobilin. And this is why your poop is brown. It's also the reason your pee is yellow. As it's going through your intestinal system, some of this bilirubin is reabsorbed back into your blood, and some of it goes back and it's put back in your bile. So it's kind of like a circle. Some of it gets to go to your kidneys and it's excreted into your pee, making it yellow. As you can see, the process of breaking down these red blood cells in your bruises, giving it the change of color that it has, is almost the same process of why your poop ends up brown and your pee ends up yellow. So the next time you get a bruise and you're watching it change colors, I hope you also think of your poop too. And that's it. That's all about your bruises, your poop, and your pee. Again, as always, thank you so much for taking your time to watch this, and I hope you have a fantastic week, and I'll see you next time. Bye.